All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Beyond the River of Woke, a guide to reclaiming reality, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. The Gorgon's Ledger, why hastening her success is spiritual serfdom, and how the syllogism of her body, her debt, smashes the gynocentric matrix. You stand on the precipice of a civilization that has lost its mind, chanting mantras of equity while sprinting toward the cliff of demographic suicide. I look around and see the ruins of the West, not crumbling from external invaders, but rotting from the inside out, hollowed by a parasitic ideology that worships the feminine imperative as a new state religion. You have been sold a diabolical lie that the tests you endure in your relationships, the passive-aggressive jabs at your confidence, the accidental incompetence designed to enslave you to her chores, the demand that you bow before her corporate success are signs of love or mere quirks of female nature. They are not. They are the psychological warfare of a solipsistic gender. Biological probes designed to locate the weak points in your logos so that the feminine chaos can invade and conquer the masculine order. We are living in a gynocentric slaughterhouse where the nice guy is led to the killing floor with a smile on his face, convinced that his compliance is a virtue when it is, in fact, the vice of cowardice. Consider the supreme asymmetry of the her body, her choice dogma, a biological fleece so massive it blocks out the sun. By what twisted alchemy of natural law does exclusive reproductive autonomy grant a license to seize the financial resources of another human being? If the choice is hers, the cost must be hers, yet the state acts as the enforcer for a financial extraction racket that would make the mafia blush. You are funding the very forces that seek to dismantle your fatherhood, your dignity, and your lineage. I have seen the court orders. I have seen the weeping men dragged into debtors' prisons disguised as family courts, their crime being nothing more than providing for a woman who decided, on a hormonal whim, to destroy the family unit. This is not marriage. It is a prolonged session of financial cuckoldry, enforced by the threat of state violence, where your labor is taxed to pay for the choices of a species that has weaponized its own incompetence to secure your servitude. It is time to pick up the sword of the trivium and cut through this Gordian knot of cultural Marxism. We must expose the success narrative for what it is. A sad joke where a woman obtains a mid-level management position via die quotas and expects you to applaud her rejection of the very domestic harmony that built this civilization. You must learn to laugh in the face of the test, to see the shit test, not as a hurdle, but as an opportunity to display the amused mastery of the patriarch. We are going to dissect the anatomy of the lie, tracing the etymology of virtus back to its root of manly courage, and systematically dismantle the irrationality of the feminine frame. We are reclaiming reality from the hysterical mob, proving through irrefutable syllogism that the only path back to the good, the true, and the beautiful is through the iron gates of unapologetic, rational, and dominant masculinity. The war for your soul begins now. The gynocentric Gorgon, dissecting the psychological warfare of the test. Women are directly adapted to act as the nurses and educators of our early childhood, for the simple reason that they themselves are childish. frivolous and short-sighted, wrote a certain gloomy German philosopher whose piercing gaze into the female soul was so acute that modernity has spent 2 centuries trying to burn his books. He wasn't being a misogynist, he was being a naturalist, observing the disconnect between the adult burdens of the logos and the perpetual adolescence of the womb-centric mind. Consider the modern test, that seemingly innocuous shit test or comfort test, which is nothing less than a psychic incursion, a Gorgon's glare intended to turn the living spirit of the masculine into a statue of utility. This is not play, it is metaphysical warfare. When a woman tests a man, she is not merely seeking reassurance. She is actively probing for structural weakness in the reality you have built, probing to see if the virtues of the West, stoicism, fortitude, virtus hold firm, or if they will crumble into the dust of people-pleasing servility. Take the case of the corporate queen bee, a specimen I recently observed in the wilds of a high-rise legal firm in Chicago. This creature, a 35-year-old partner earning 3 times the median income, sat across from a suitor, a skilled carpenter who builds the actual physical furniture of civilization, and sighed with the weight of 1,000 suns. "I just need a man who can handle my career," she lamented, demanding he take time off his craft to manage her calendar and soothe her cortisol spikes. Here is the solipsism laid bare. She has masculinized herself via the corporate ladder, abandoning her complementary polarity, and is now miserable for lack of the very submission to nature she rejected. She demands he abandon his mastery of wood to become a secretary for her mastery of litigation. It is a grotesque inversion of the natural law. She seeks not a husband, but a eunuch to guard the harem of her ego. By refusing to bow to this success, the carpenter was not intimidated, as her framing insisted. He was adhering to the transcendental good by rejecting a union based on the anti-civilizational values of corporate servitude and cultural Marxism. Let us dissect this virtus, this etymological spine of our civilization. The Latin virtus translates literally to manliness, derived from vir, man, encompassing courage, excellence, and strength of character. It is the martial spirit that built the roads, the aqueducts, and the legal codes. When a woman deploys the test, she is launching an assault on this very concept. She presents a crisis, feigned incompetence, emotional volatility, a bad day, to see if you will trade your virtus for the cheap currency of simpering accommodation. If you comply, you fail. You become the nice guy, the tragic archetype, who believes that the way to a woman's heart is through the death of his own spirit. Compliance with gynocentrism is the fastest route to indentured spiritual servitude. By passing her test through servitude, you have proven yourself a slave, not a master. You have validated the lie that her momentary emotional caprice is more important than the objective reality of your mission. View the pretending to be bad strategy through the rigid logic of the syllogism. Major premise: skill and truthfulness stand as primary virtues required for an operational society. Minor premise: a female feigns inability, asserting she cannot swap a tire or handle finances to provoke masculine effort or sympathy. Conclusion: she deploys vice, deceit, and ineptitude against the male drive for effectiveness, showing her allegiance rests in exploitation instead of shared partnership. This exhibits the gamma bias found in encouragement. When one rushes to assist her with a job she can easily manage, one does not act as a gentleman in the historic sense. One actively joins the erosion of reality. One validates the lie. One signals that her manipulation succeeds, thus rewarding the specific conduct that transforms romances into hostage scenarios. Then there is the transactional materialism of the who pays test. Feminists shriek about independence while clutching the bill like a drowning sailor clutches a life raft. Seeing if he offers to pay is framed as a test of generosity or romance, but strip away the sentimentality and the skeletal structure of prostitution is revealed. If the union is contingent upon resource extraction, his wealth transferred to her stomach, then the contract is not a sacramental marriage, a union of souls under God, but a temporary lease of her company. A man who refuses to play this game, who applies the logic of reciprocity, is not cheap. He is a defender of the economic sanity of the family unit. He recognizes that a woman who demands tribute before the first date will demand alimony after the divorce. And with family courts awarding women custody in over 80% of cases and alimony serving as a permanent pension for bad behavior, he is merely practicing the defensive warfare necessary for survival in a gynocentric police state. To navigate this minefield, you must weaponize the trivium. First, the grammar, identify the test. Is she genuinely asking for help, or is she manufacturing a crisis to measure your reaction? Read the room. Second, the logic, analyze the motive. She is screening for dominance. If you fold, she wins your labor and loses her respect for you. If you hold frame, you trigger her hypergamous instinct to submit to a superior will. Third, the rhetoric, deliver the response. This is the art of amused mastery. When she says, "I'm so bad at math, can you do my taxes?" you do not reach for the calculator. You laugh. You say, "I'm sure a strong, independent woman like yourself can figure out addition." You reject the frame of servitude. You smash the modern Babylon of woke by refusing to speak its language of male sacrifice. You reclaim reality by asserting that your time, your mind, and your virtus are not bargaining chips to be bartered away for a smile, but sacred treasures to be guarded by the immutable laws of the West. We must speak the forbidden truth that this biological grift, the separation of the alpha seed from the beta provider's resources, is not merely a modern inconvenience, but a civilizational catastrophe facilitated by the state's monopoly on violence. This is not a social construct to be deconstructed by the pseudo-intellectuals of gender studies. It is a cold, hard mechanism of extraction, a parasitism enforced by the jackboot of positive law. The her body, his wallet dynamic is a violation of the natural law of reciprocity, a fundamental asymmetry that treats men as expendable beasts of burden. The ledger of leeches dismantling the her body, his wallet parasitism. "Frailty, thy name is woman," cried Hamlet. But in our neutered age, we have swapped the poetry of Shakespeare for the prose of servitude, renaming that frailty empowerment and funding it with the sweat of browbeaten men. Consider the grim biological calculus that modernity attempts to suppress. Nature is not a sanctuary of equality, but a crucible of competition, and in this arena, the feminine imperative has historically relied on the masculine utility of resource acquisition. Evolutionary psychology, that forbidden science, confirms what the troubadours and theologians of the West once knew but dared not speak too loudly, that the female mating strategy is fundamentally dualistic. Seek the optimal genes for offspring, then secure the optimal resources for survival, often from different donors. This is not malice, it is biology. But malice arises when the state, acting as the enforcer of the feminine imperative, codifies this biological opportunism into a human rights racket, transforming the natural reciprocity of the sexes into a parasitic her body, his wallet dystopia, where the man is reduced to a mere life support system for a wallet, stripped of his dignity and his decision-making power. Observe the hideous structure binding the financial cuckold, a male sacrificed upon the altar of positive law, a system that has torn asunder the holy bond connecting rights with duties, the core of Western justice. Society proclaims that a woman holds exclusive, untouchable dominion regarding reproduction. Her body, her choice. A creed providing her the power to decide existence for the unborn, while requiring no accountability for that life once born. Should a male lack agency in generating life? Should his wish for fatherhood be nullified by pharmaceuticals or surgery, or his wish to escape paternity made moot by a sabotage barrier? By what distorted reasoning is he chained to the monetary weight of that decision? Logic reveals the scam. If volition entails obligation, and the man holds no reproductive volition after intercourse, then forcing monetary obligation absent volition constitutes stealing. Compelling a man to pay for a child he never opted to parent is not child support. Rather, it acts as a levy on his being, a punishment for the offense of maleness, transforming him into a bondsman of the female-centric government. This systematic humiliation violates the natural law of reciprocity, which served as the bedrock for the guild structures and the apprenticeship mastery ladder that built our civilization. In the ancient traditions of the West, a master craftsman held sovereignty over his workshop because his livelihood was inextricably linked to his skill and his choices. He owned the fruits of his labor. Today, the family court system operates as a star chamber of Marxist redistribution, forcibly transferring the wealth generated by the masculine mastery of the trades and professions to the feminine sphere, effectively demoting men from the status of sovereign masters to permanent novitiates in their own lives. The data on paternity fraud, where studies suggest non-paternity rates in some populations soar as high as 10 to 30%, is the punchline to this cosmic joke. A man can toil for decades to support another man's genetic lineage, and if he discovers the deceit, the courts will still garnish his wages for the best interest of the child, proving that in the eyes of the state, his labor is a communal resource to be harvested, not a private property to be hoarded. We must call this what it is: the invisible hand of theft, guided by the ghost of Karl Marx. The modern welfare state acts as the ultimate beta provider, using the taxation power to extract resources from men to subsidize female mating choices that exclude those very same men. When women choose hot bad boys for genetic excitement in their 20s and then look to the boring provider to fund the aftermath in their 30s, they are simply following biological imperative. The crime lies with the state that mandates the provider must pay. This destroys the incentive structure that motivates men to build, to protect, and to innovate. Why should a man climb the mastery ladder, practicing the virtues of diligence and fortitude, if the fruits of his labor are seized to fund the demographic winter of a society that despises him? The West is dying not because of climate change or insufficient diversity, but because we have broken the sexual constitution, divorcing cost from benefit and sentencing men to a life of taxation without representation. The remedy to this gangrene is not mere complaint, but a logical reassertion of the financial abortion, a concept as necessary as the Magna Carta was to the barons of old. If her body, her choice is the absolute law of the land, granting women unilateral authority to opt out of parenthood via abortion or adoption, then the immutable laws of logic demand an equivalent mechanism for men. His wallet, his choice. A man must have a legal window to surrender his parental rights and responsibilities entirely, severing the financial tether. This is not cruelty, it is the restoration of the dialectic balance. It forces the feminine back into alignment with reality, requiring that choices be made with the foreknowledge that resources are not guaranteed by the threat of state violence. To save Western civilization from the abyss, we must tear up the ledger of leeches and re-establish the only social contract that has ever functioned, one where sovereignty and sacrifice are borne equally or not at all. This resentment manifests as a specific economic pathology. We previously exposed the domestic invisible hand of theft, where the state extracts wealth from the male producer to fund the female consumer. This same mechanism of plunder is the engine of the broader woke revolution. The feminist welfare state is but a microcosm of the globalist Leviathan. The pathological envy of the weak does not merely seek to steal the wallet of the father, but to dismantle the entire architecture of Western competence that father built. The alchemy of envy, refuting the wealth redistribution of cultural Marxism. Equality is a slogan based on envy. Observe the sage of the Salons, and nowhere is this envy more rabid than in the modern iteration of cultural Marxism. Look at the history of the 20th century. Every totalitarian experiment, from the frozen gulags of the East to the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge, began with the same siren song, the leveling of the distinct. It is the ancient parasitic impulse of the weak to shackle the strong. We see it today in the woke West. It is not new, merely the latest version of the resentment that bubbles up when the natural hierarchy of competence becomes unbearable to the mediocre. They do not want to climb the mountain. They wish to flatten it so that we are all merely debris on the plain. Consider the formal logic of this madness. The leftist dogma of equity operates on a single, toxic premise. Premise A, all outcomes must be equal across groups. Premise B, natural ability and drive are distributed unequally among individuals. Conclusion, therefore, the superior must be hobbled to elevate the inferior. This is the syllogism of the leveler. It is a declaration of war against excellence itself. It is the ethos of the crab bucket. where any crab that dares to climb the rim is dragged back down by the writhing mass below. When you see a diversity mandate, you are not seeing justice. You are witnessing the administrative installation of mediocrity to appease the specter of envy. We must rip the mask off the success myth that has been sold to us by the feminist industrial complex. We are told to worship the independent woman and her success. But if we apply the rigorous lens of the trivium, we see a pathetic fallacy. Her success is often a diplomatic title given to a bureaucrat occupying a seat created by a diversity, inclusion, equity mandate. It is the Peter Principle weaponized. We see competent men builders, engineers, logisticians sidelined so that a diversity hire can mismanage the supply chain. This is not a victimless crime. It is the displacement of the competent by the compliant, the substitution of the true with the politically convenient. Do not be distracted by the racial smokescreen of critical race theory. While the left foams at the mouth about racial equity, they are executing the greatest wealth transfer in history, and it is not from white to black, it is from male to female. This is the CRT distraction, a sophisticated sleight of hand to hide the gender war behind a class war. While the proles argue about skin pigment, the state is busy liquidating the assets of the working man to fund the matriarchal welfare state. They obscure the reality that wealth is being redistributed from the net tax-paying producer to the net-consuming academic and corporate female. This lunacy scales up from the domestic to the political. We see the conspiracy of mediocrity in the administrative state, which mirrors the domestic manipulation of the feminine. Just as the manipulator feigns incompetence to avoid accountability and illicit provision, the modern bureaucracy feigns ineptitude to demand more funding. Oh, we failed to fix the roads, give us more money. It is a machine designed to harvest the surplus energy of the male laborer and convert it into sinecures for the unproductive. It is the passive-aggressive parasitism of the feminized state. The result is the total atomization of civil society. The left understands that organic trust born of guilds, churches, and voluntary associations is a threat to their totalizing power. By replacing the apprenticeship mastery ladder with the diversity statement, they dissolve the bonds of brotherhood. You cannot have a guild when the master is forced to hire an apprentice based on genitalia rather than potential. We are left as isolated individuals, defenseless against the encroaching blob, stripped of the intermediating institutions that once shielded us from the state's voracious appetite. Follow the money if you want the truth. The economic reality is irrefutable, and it destroys the patriarchy myth. Data consistently shows that net taxpayers are overwhelmingly men, while net beneficiaries are overwhelmingly women. The so-called wage gap is actually a transfer gap. It is the sweat of the construction worker paying for the women's studies majors grant. The patriarchy is a lie. We are living in a matriarchal welfare state funded by male labor, where the gynocentrism of the biological realm has been amplified and weaponized by the fiscal machinery of the state. Let us be done with the emotional pleasantries and look at the logic of the loot. Redistribution based on identity is a formal fallacy known as hasty generalization turned into law. By rewarding failure and punishing competence, they invert the transcendental of the beautiful. They seek to replace the natural hierarchy of ability with a synthetic hierarchy of victimhood. It creates a moral hazard where the rational choice becomes to be oppressed, or at least to identify as such. It is a suicide pact for a civilization. The remedy is not found in the voting booth, but in the restoration of the natural order. We must enact the return of the king. This means the re-establishment of the patriarchal family structure where resources are controlled by the producer. We must starve the beast. We must reject the alimony, the simping, and the corporate submission. We must build our own subsidiarity, where the man is the sovereign of his domain. Only when the feedback loop of merit and reward is restored and the parasitic equity is starved of its host will the demon of cultural Marxism be cast back into the shadows. We have dragged the wretched beast of cultural Marxism into the light, dissecting its parasitic nature to reveal that the patriarchy is nothing but a myth used to justify the theft of male labor. Yet, to simply identify the cancer is not to cure it. The red-pilled man must do more than complain. He must weaponize his rejection of the lie. We must refuse to be the clay in the left's Tower of Babel and instead become the architects of a new reality, arming ourselves with the trivium to deflect their lies and ascending the apprenticeship mastery ladder to forge an indestructible core of competence. There is no negotiation with the void, only the hard discipline of construction. The phalanx of logos, reinstating the master builder through natural law. For the strength of the tower is the stone, and the strength of the stone is the cornerstone. Reject the cornerstone, and the whole edifice crumbles into the dust of history. A man who steps into the modern dating market without the shield of the trivium is a knight riding into battle, naked, drunk, and convinced that the enemy's arrows are merely an invitation to dialogue. The leftist linguistic trap operates by redefining the battlefield itself. They shift the meaning of violence to include disagreement and hate to include preference, hoping you will stumble into their verbal quicksand. Grammar, the first leg of the trivium, demands that we define our terms before we swing our swords. Violence derives from the Latin violentia, meaning vehemence or physical force, not the mild discomfort a gender studies major feels when you point out that biological sex is immutable. Logic, the second leg, then takes these defined terms and arranges them into an impenetrable phalanx. Premise A, words are not physical objects. Premise B, only physical objects can exert kinetic force. Conclusion, speech is therefore not violence. Rhetoric, the crown of the trivium, delivers this truth with such devastating precision that the mid-wit Marxist is left stammering about your lived experience. A phrase that is nothing more than a confession that they have abandoned objective reality for the solipsism of their own feelings. The household, the fundamental unit of civilization, has been degraded from a hierarchy of competence into a tyranny of feelings, a noisy democracy where the vote of the responsible adult is cancelled by the tantrum of the dependent. Aristotle described the polis as a partnership of families, but if the family itself is a micro-socialist state where the productive male is leeched upon by the consuming female, the city must inevitably collapse. The solution is the mixed constitution of the home, a return to the monarchical principle where the man serves as the executive, the logos, providing the structure, the resources, and the final veto. This is not tyranny, for a tyrant rules for his own pleasure, while a patriarch rules for the good of the order. The wife serves as the supportive partner, the first officer whose role is to advise, to nurture, and to execute the domestic policy set by the master builder. You cannot run a corporation with two CEOs constantly vetoing each other, and you cannot run a family as a committee of feelings. Nature abhors a vacuum of authority, and if you abdicate your throne, the state or the shrieking harpy of chaos will take your place. Consider the sheer biological bad faith of the strong independent woman trope, a lie so massive it blocks out the sun. You are told to celebrate her career, her success, and her independence, yet the statistics from the Institute for Family Studies reveal the harsh, cold truth. Marriages where the wife earns more than the husband are significantly more likely to end in divorce. This is not a social construct, it is an evolutionary reality, a vestige of hypergamy that the leftist narrative cannot train out of the human animal. The virtue of rejection is the red-pilled man's moral duty. You must prune the dead wood of gynocentric validation from your life. Refusing to applaud her career is not petty, it is prudence, the mother of all virtues, recognizing that resources invested in a corporate drone are resources stolen from the lineage you are trying to build. Ignoring her tests is not a gain. It is justice, a refusal to feed the beast of her insecurity with the scraps of your attention. This brings us to the application of the awakening. Go Galt in the sexual marketplace. You are the engine of civilization, the beast of burden that pulls the plow of progress. When you withdraw your labor, your attention, and your commitment, the entire Ponzi scheme of the gynocentric state grinds to a halt. Do not buy the cow when the milk is not just free, but sour and poisoned. Starve the beast by refusing to sign the state's marriage contract, a document that is, for all intents and purposes, a unilateral transfer of your future earnings to a system that hates you. Build your own frame of reality, an indestructible fortress of competence and self-ownership that no shit test can penetrate. When a woman throws her emotional feces at your wall, do not catch it and examine it. Simply, let it slide down the polished glass of your indifference. Your path is not a quest for the fleeting drug-like high of female validation. It is the apprenticeship mastery ladder of life, a climb toward wisdom, stoicism, and the reinscription of the logos in your own soul. Look at the wreckage of the woke matrix, a house of cards built on the fallacy of appeal to emotion, the ad hominem and the straw man. It shatters the moment you poke it with a sharp stick of formal logic. They tell you that trans women are women, a statement that fails the basic law of non-contradiction. A category cannot contain its own negation. They scream that silence is violence, a syllogism so profoundly idiotic it refutes itself. If silence is violence, then a mute person is a perpetual abuser, and a sleeping man is a criminal. The leftist ideology is a mental illness, a pathology of resentment, a demon that must be named envy, sloth, and pride, and cast out with the exorcism of the Western canon. Read the Republic, study the City of God, and arm yourself with the wisdom of the ages. The modern Babylon of woke is a flimsy facade painted over the rotting structure of relativism, and it will fall. The path forward is the community of the awakened, the formation of new civil society associations that Tocqueville saw as the strength of America, but now recreated as fraternal orders of red-pilled men. The bad actors, the leftist agitators, the false flagging feminists, the simping white knights must be exiled from your consciousness, cast into the outer darkness where the weeping and gnashing of their teeth will be the only soundtrack to their irrelevance. A parallel society is emerging, one based on merit, truth, and the natural law that governed our ancestors. It is a world where a man is judged by his works, not his privilege, where the master builder is once again revered, not reviled. The promise of the future is a world reclaimed, a world where the equality of opportunity is the only law, and the equity of outcome is exposed as the communist lie it always was. The final syllogism is the verdict of history. If Western civilization is the pinnacle of human achievement, and Western civilization was built on the back of the patriarchal logos, then the restoration of the patriarchal logos is the only path to saving the future from the river of woe. The choice is yours, man. Sink into the delta of the river, choked by the weeds of feminism and socialism, or climb the bank, pick up the tools of your ancestors, and build the world anew. You have emerged from the fog of gynocentric indoctrination, your eyes wiped clean by the harsh, stinging salt of truth. You now see the diabolical inversion at the heart of the woke parasite, a legal and cultural system which enshrines female choice as sacrosanct while enslaved male resources as communal property, a logical blasphemy against the natural law of reciprocity which holds that agency must always be paired with liability. You have learned to diagnose the shit test as what it truly is, a caterwauling psychological probe, a solipsistic probe deployed by the feminine imperative to sniff out weakness and subvert the masculine logos, not some innocent romantic quirk. This is the gynocentric Gorgon, and you have stared her down without turning to stone, armed with the shield of dialectic and the sword of Virtus. Do not mistake this knowledge for a burden. It is your Excalibur, your liberation from the psychological and financial servitude that has crushed generations of nice guys. You now understand the grand syllogism of the extractive state, a system which grants reproductive autonomy exclusively to women, her body, her choice, yet compels men to finance those choices, his wallet. His obligation is not a partnership, but a tiered system of serfdom, with the average family court docket acting as a debtor's tribunal for men, and with paternity fraud rates hovering between 10 to 30% in some studied populations. You are not a partner in a marriage, but a cog in a wealth transfer machine designed to convert your labor into state-enforced female support. You have been a financial cuckold to the matriarchal welfare state, and now you have the financial abortion of the soul to refuse this reproductive socialism. You have reclaimed your wallet as the fruit of your apprenticeship, your mastery ladder, and your competence. This is your call to go galt in the sexual marketplace, not out of bitterness, but from a place of supreme prudence and justice. Starve the beast, Withdraw your labor from the diversity, inclusion, equity commissariats. Mock the high-powered corporate queen bee and her make work success as the Peter Principle writ large, a cultural Marxism participation trophy for displacing competent men. Build new civil society associations, fraternal orders, underground guilds, digital phalanxes of awakened men, based on merit, truth, and the transcendentals of the good, the true, and the beautiful. The river of woke is a sewer of envy, but you have seen the far bank. It is a land where the mixed constitution is restored to the home, where the man is the logos-wielding executive and the woman the supportive partner, where wealth flows to competence and truth is the only currency. Go forth, red-pilled centurion. Your boots were made for walking out of the plantation. The dawn of the patriarchal reawakening has broken, and you are its herald. Share this gospel. Your brother's soul may depend on it. And now the sponsored book introduction, Beyond the River of Woke, a guide to reclaiming reality. The world's on fire, and you've been handed a bucket of woke fairy tales to put it out. Let's cut the bullshit. I wrote this book because I watched friends get fired for cracking jokes, saw engineers replaced by diversity hires who couldn't spell safety protocol, and got called a bigot for arguing that biology isn't a feeling. If you've ever been told to man up while simultaneously being shamed for existing as a man, you're not alone. This isn't theory, it's survival. I've sat across from guys who lost their kids, their homes, and their pride to a system that treats masculinity as a crime and merit as a relic. When they lowered firefighter fitness standards to meet gender quotas, people died. When Leah Thomas crushed female swimmers, scholarships vanished. When Twitter censored facts, lies thrived. This isn't progress, it's collapse. This book is for men who are tired of being gaslit into apologizing for their DNA. It's for the guy working overtime to fund an ex-wife's yoga retreat, the dad labeled toxic for wanting his son to learn math instead of masturbation seminars, and the young man told his worth hinges on how well he parrots feminist slogans. You'll learn how to dodge false abuse claims, spot media lies, and rebuild a life they can't tax or cancel. We'll dissect the marriage plantation, gut the wage gap myth, and arm you with evolutionary truths that make leftists seethe. Ever wonder why boys are drugged into compliance, or how to shield your kids from school indoctrination? The answers here aren't polite, they're effective. If you're content being a beta wallet for bureaucrats and bitter exes, stop reading now. This isn't for the guy who thinks toxic masculinity is a real diagnosis or believes chromosomes are a social construct. Go binge Netflix guilt trips about your privilege instead. But if you're ready to fight, to reclaim your voice, your rights, and your purpose, this is your field manual. The woke playbook relies on your silence. Time to burn it. Beyond the River of Woke, a guide to reclaiming reality, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.